and welcome to the 9 News Business Buzz, where we take up the important issues that are impacting you and our economy. I'm Ryan Frazier, your host, 9 News business expert and CEO of Frazier Global. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Ed Sealover from the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and the editor of The Sum and Substance. Ed, how's it going, man?
It's going great. I'm ready to talk business today.
Let's get into it. Now, there's a topic that consumers really care about: price gouging. You know, you get a lot of attention when you hear those words and a lot of feelings. It elicits a lot of emotion from that. There's a new bill down at the state capitol that's looking to crack down on the practice. Give us the rundown.
Well, let's just say this. Since 2020, we already have price gouging as an illegal act, as some might assume. The trick is there are 2 specificities around that. One, it's price gouging only if you're gouging people during a declared emergency, like, say, the COVID pandemic, which is what brought about this. The second is it doesn't define price gouging. This new bill defines price gouging as raising prices for any good that affects the public health, welfare, or safety, that's anything, by more than 10% over its average price from the 90-day period before. Now, on potatoes, for example, people hate the price of potatoes. That could mean you raise that sack 25 cents, and you are now price gouging. And this is why this is catching so much attention from the business world as well as consumers.
All right, well, let's talk about the pros and the cons of this, right? Because I don't care who you talk to, no one likes price gouging. So when you hear that, you automatically, your guard goes up and you say, what's going on here? Is it my gas? Is it my potatoes? What's the arguments for and against this bill?
Well, the arguments for this bill from the proponents is that the price of living is going too high. You know who's going to argue that? Nobody. Yes, the price of living in Colorado is way up. We are one of the highest in the country right now. And there is ways to look at doing that, at rolling that back. Republicans at the Capitol, for example, say, let's roll back fees and regulations, and that will bring down the reason that prices are going up so high. Democrats are saying, for the most part, no, we want to stop the charging of high prices. And so specifically for this bill, they feel like it is retailers who are going in and are charging things that are too high. They say, look, we understand that retailers had to raise prices of, say, toilet paper or diapers when there were supply chain fritzes during the COVID pandemic. But those days are past, and they haven't commensurately brought prices down. That's why we need to go in now and say, look, if you're raising them for no reason again, you are going to be prosecuted by the state attorney general's office.
Yeah, nobody will complain about making sure no one's price gouging. Get that. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of this legislation on businesses. Just a bit more, Ed. As a business owner myself, you see these types of regulations and legislation, and immediately you start to think, okay, there's a place for sensible regulations that are needed to protect the health, safety, welfare of the public and society.
No argument there.
Right? But there's also the side of it that says you're going to start to, discourage businesses from operating in the state of Colorado. Talk to us a little bit more about the impact of this potential legislation should it pass.
Well, it's worth noting there is an exemption in this legislation that you can raise prices beyond that 10% if your suppliers are causing you to raise prices, if what they're charging you is then being passed on. That, however, doesn't take into account all the other things that go into price hikes. For example, raises in the cost of labor, whether that be because of market impacts or because you're seeing minimum wage hikes that the state is pushing each year. There also could be regulations that are affecting your business that's causing you to bring in a lot of back office people to maintain things that's going to affect the cost of you putting out a product. That is not considered an exemption in this bill either. So the effect of this bill, if it goes into place, is that a lot more retailers, if they're going to have to keep their prices down, are going to shift their cost cutting elsewhere. That's probably going to be in personnel, first of all. That's usually your most expensive measure, how much you're paying your workers. And if you have to cut costs because you can't raise your prices above a certain level, that's where you're going to look. Cutting personnel, cutting hours, and consumers are going to see the impacts of these in different ways, in ways they may not necessarily like either.
Yeah, I think about, when I hear about legislation like this, I think, is this something that just needs to go die, somewhere and go away, because it's much ado about nothing? Or is there a need for some sort of alternative way to protect consumers from price gouging without excessive regulation? Is there some discussion about a middle ground, a compromise, or different way to addressing the concerns from those who are pushing this legislation?
The middle ground idea seems to be around this idea that, look, let's do this and expand the definition of declared emergencies. Let's have this during a disaster or something like that. But most other states that have a law like this in place, especially states like Michigan and Ohio that the proponents point to as examples of this, require some kind of declared emergency to consider this price gouging. And I think that's the big issue here. When is price gouging, and when is price gouging simply raising the prices to reflect market conditions? And many businesses are saying this bill hits on the latter in a way that's going to make it nearly impossible to operate.
Now, let's turn to another complex issue that directly impacts healthcare costs for Coloradans: insurance mandates. We all got to have it. Not everybody does, but lawmakers are debating whether to mandate some things. Ed, give us the rundown and the story on what's happening down at the Capitol.
You can look at this the same way you look at price gouging, that insurance mandates are there to make sure you're not getting charged huge amounts for a worthless product. Say if you're paying for an insurance product that requires you to cover 90% of the cost yourself, that's not a product you want to see on the market. But what's happening is, as we go along, more and more conditions are required to be covered by the state. And every time you add something in else that a health insurance company has to mandate, that's going to raise their costs of coverage. They're going to pass it along to employers, and usually employers will then pass that along to employees, and you end up as an employee paying more for your insurance every year. And we're seeing that effect with a couple of bills this year. First, I want to hit one that I think consumers are going to be real interested in, and that is a bill that would mandate that insurers cover drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy that are aimed at obesity reduction. In the big picture, a lot of people love this idea. Obesity is a crisis in American health right now. It leads to things like diabetes, and that's raising costs in other ways. And they say, oh, if I could just have these drugs, I would be healthier. The problem is these drugs are very, very expensive. In fact, one estimate has said that if this were to pass and these were to be mandated, the average person would pay $18 to $24 more per month for their insurance, whether or not they're using these drugs or not, because that's how much it's going to cost insurance plans to cover these altogether.
I think that's for me. When I hear that, I think about my mother, I think about my aunts, I think about my family, right? And I think most people do as well. How does this impact families, people, and oftentimes, and this goes back to the whole regulatory conversation that we've continued to have both at the state level and the national level in terms of deregulation versus more regulation, and what's the right solution to, bringing down the cost of doing business and living in general versus protecting consumers and ensuring that they're not taken advantage of. How do you explain this issue, Ed, to I don't know, man, your mom or to another loved one, you're sitting across the table, so that they really understand what this means for them or could mean for them?
Well, what it could mean for them is two things. One, if you are a user of one of these pharmaceuticals, this is probably great because it's going to save you a ton of money. But imagine you're not a user of one of these pharmaceuticals. Are you willing to pay another $300 per year for your insurance policy so that somebody else can do it? And where's the balance there? I mean, how essential is covering this drug versus other drugs? I mean, there are other drugs out there that some people would say, I want to be covered as well. That's going to bring down my cost of medication, but that's going to do it at a cost to others. So how you explain it is, where do you want this balance to be? What are you willing to pay to make sure everybody else has everything they need? And where does it get to a point where even if you had to pay this much more for your insurance, you would think twice about it, even if you were benefiting from it?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that while there may be some people who benefit from this legislation, were it to pass, there's a lot more people who will be actually impacted potentially adversely in terms of their cost of care going up and their premiums and things along those lines.
And that's true with pretty much any kind of insurance bill. I want to hit on another one now, too, that's going through, very controversial, that would cap the amount that hospitals could charge patients who are either covered by small group plans, that's plans of companies of 100 or fewer people, or that are covered by the state government plan. That's the 32,000 people who literally work for the state government or for the state universities. In some way, those people would benefit. If you cap the amount that hospitals can charge those folks, That's a benefit to them, and that's not an insubstantial portion of the population. However, if you cap what hospitals can charge, hospitals have to figure out some way to make up for that lost revenue. And again, as we discussed earlier, that usually involves cutting costs elsewhere. That involves cutting costs of services they may offer. So yes, maybe if you're employed by a small business, you might get a break on some of your insurance costs for this. But if you can't get a service you need at the hospital, if they're not saying treating this particular disease, or they have to cut a cardiology unit, or as we recently saw with a hospital down in the southeast part of the state, they cut their OB practice. So, I mean, if you had to drive another 2 hours to give birth, how much is that worth you to cut your everyday insurance payments?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer there, Ryan. It's about balance, and it's about the state stepping in and saying, this is what we're going to mandate. When is it that the state should not be doing that?
Yeah, and I can certainly understand the concern, from both sides. I've heard a lot from some of the folks in the hospital community who've obviously expressed some big concerns over this, particularly for those hospitals who are just operating on the margins. I know a lot of folks who are out there sometimes feel like hospitals are price gouging, but there are a number of hospitals, particularly in rural communities, for instance, who oftentimes are barely surviving. And so the impact of this in terms of their ability to continue to serve and provide those critical care services to their communities could also be impacted. So I think there needs to be a conversation at the state level about that angle as well.
Absolutely, and in this particular bill, there is an exemption for what are called the critical care safety net hospitals out in rural communities. And I'm sure I butchered the term there, but that's 32 hospitals in small areas where there's nobody else near them. However, that exemption doesn't include folks like Denver Health, who are struggling to make ends meet right now, and who also will likely have to cut services if they have to cap the prices that they get from some insurers.
Finally, let's explore a cutting-edge topic that could have major implications for Colorado and the nation: crypto reserves. Could holding Bitcoin or Ethereum and other digital assets be a smart move? David Waxman, CEO of Waxman and a leading expert in AI and crypto, joins the conversation. David, welcome. Give us the state of play here.
Ryan, thanks so much for having me. I've got to tell you, right now, AI is leading the conversation because we're seeing jobs already being lost to some of these LLMs that are coming out from OpenAI and from Anthropic. It's really interesting. From Google, Facebook, everyone's coming out with kind of their own versions of these, and it's transforming the markets already. I've got to tell you, we're going to dive into that a little bit here, but let's talk about crypto to begin with. Today, Bitcoin is somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. It's quite volatile and changes all the time. But just a year ago, on January 1st, it was about $45,000, and only 10 years before that, it was near zero. So we've seen kind of an exponential rise in the value of Bitcoin. And consequently, in 2024, as Donald Trump was running for president, one of the things he decided to kind of make his entire campaign about was that he was going to make America a crypto-friendly country. What does that mean? What does that mean for me as a consumer? Well, maybe not much, but Trump is convinced that if Bitcoin goes up enough, and if America holds enough Bitcoin, they could conceivably pay off the national debt, or at least make a dent in it, simply by having crypto reserves. So this essentially has been the accelerant in a conversation that's been long brewing in the House and the Senate, where congresspersons, policymakers, I should say, have been trying to figure out how best to take advantage of the rise of the crypto industry, of the digital assets themselves, and of course of all the companies that are kind of experimenting, building new solutions and deploying them. And so when Trump won, what happened was the crypto markets responded positively. Prices skyrocketed in response to him not only implementing a potential strategic reserve, which we can talk about, but also all sorts of new types of regulations and policies that are going to make it a lot easier for crypto companies to operate in the United States.
Touch a little bit on, David, on the strategic crypto reserve, so people kind of know what that is, but also what are the biggest opportunities and challenges as this starts to really come into the mainstream of America, where a lot of folks are still trying to figure out what cryptocurrencies are?
Well, one of the great opportunities would be, what if the U.S., let's say Bitcoin goes from, let's call it 100,000 today to $1 million down the road. And many experts predict it's possible. When will that happen? No one knows. And so, worth noting, no one should be investing anything in crypto that they aren't prepared to fully lose. It really is a totally volatile asset class. And so, in fact, for the government to be investing this much into it, one might say, is that a very wise move at all? This is what kind of the critics are saying. But let's say it does go from 100,000 to $1 million each. If the United States is holding enough of that, then the U.S. essentially will have that to either sell later on or to use that to make loans against down the road. It could have a huge impact on national security if the United States simply has enough of these strategic reserves in the bank.
Yeah. So, obviously there's risk, but there's risk in everything. Any investment you make, I don't care if it's stocks or bonds or other types of real estate, there's always risk. Of course, there's risk in crypto as well. If you were, David, talking to, someone who has no idea what crypto is about and really wants to better understand the significance of this moment in U.S. history, what would you say?
Well, I'd say that right now, the crypto industry, which essentially has been mostly blossoming in the United States for 10 plus years, it's going to be even bigger over the next 10 years. So if I'm a grandma, I should know that I could probably put some of my savings in there and they might grow. I could probably know that my kids and my grandkids could probably work in the crypto industry and earn a very good living because the industry is growing exponentially every single year. And I should know that many regular everyday things like payments are improving because of crypto. One of the major issues we've had are cross-border payments. Many people are sending money, even here in Colorado, they're sending money overseas, and wire transfers are expensive and take a really long time. Crypto payments make it near instantaneous and are essentially risk-free. Again, as long as you're talking about sending money from one person to another.
Yeah. Now, some say, and jumping, I remember back in the day, 2012, when I had to buy some Bitcoin, and I wish I would have then because it'd be worth so much more today. But that said, it was only worth $1 then. But some say that the possibility of the U.S. government entering into the crypto markets will also increase the likelihood of more regulation, which pros and cons, because crypto tends to come from a deregulated market, which is one of the pluses to it. But it also provides a little more predictability and more certainty having the U.S. government involved, which could be good for not only crypto, but for the safety and security, if you will, of more regular folks who want to get involved in this space. What do you say to that?
Well, I think the U.S. industry is calling for more regulation. The crypto industry, I should say, in the United States. They're desperate for it. During the Biden administration, there was kind of this opacity. It was very unclear as what you could do if you were a crypto business in the United States of America. And consequently, most businesses were simply going overseas. And who wants to see American jobs and American ingenuity and American entrepreneurs going overseas and setting up shop there? With the Trump administration, and even with regulation coming in, what's going to happen is you're going to see more companies set up in America, more jobs in America, and we're going to see some of these technologies bear fruit right here.
I want to hit on that because you keep talking about the jobs in America. What kind of jobs are involved in the crypto industry, and how is Colorado set up or not set up to attract these jobs?
So Colorado has some of the best engineering schools in the country. And so what we've found here in the crypto industry is that developers, love living in Colorado, love working in Colorado, and love learning in Colorado. And software developers are the #1 thing the crypto industry is trying to hire. So if you could either work in Silicon Valley or you could work in Denver and be working in an industry that pays you very well, you might choose to live in Denver. It's a heck of a place to live. And so I think that's going to go and be one of the reasons why businesses are going to set up here, simply because the labor pool is here. But on top of that, the governor has been pro-crypto, sensible pro-crypto since the very beginning. And I think that's also attracting entrepreneurs to set up shop here in Colorado. But across the United States, we need not just developers, we need marketers, we need HR people. We need pretty much everything any sort of business, Ryan, has. We need those types of people in the crypto industry. And now that there's going to be sensible rules and regulations under Trump, what I think we're going to see is more companies setting up shop here and hiring across the board.
David Waxman, CEO of Waxman, thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have for today. From price gouging to insurance mandates to crypto reserves, this has been a very impactful business discussion. As always, we aim to help you stay informed, to be engaged, and to get ahead of the game. For 9 News, The Business Buzz, my partner Ed Sealover, I'm Ryan Frazier. See you later.